Nuclear Winter 68 is a game that I've been enjoying quite a bit this past week. The game is set in an alternate universe in which World War II ended with a shower of atomic bombs over Europe that devastated pretty much all or most of Europe. But right before that, Himmler and a group of elite troops managed to escape that by hiding in a series of underground shelters, bunkers. One almost has the impression that there must be some sort of like a system of underground cities. And down there they have been waiting. I assume they also have had children and they have trained them to become new elites, because over 20 years later, in 68, these Nazi troops are coming out and they're still pretty good at fighting, so I wonder if we're talking about the descendants of the original ones, but they still had their old dream of conquering the world. However, now they find themselves not in the old Germany that they knew, but in this bizarre atomic wasteland where there are strange creatures that are just roaming the land, and actually they are the mutants that now inhabit the radioactive zone. Nazi versus mutants, and to this mix you can also add NATO troops that are entering the zone, the radioactive zone, to investigate the mysterious and strange events that take place there. So here we have a war game in which we're going to have battles involving Nazis, mutants, and NATO troops. Pretty interesting idea here. The game, in terms of rules and system, reminded me of a very simplified version of the lock and load system. Also reminded me of a game by Lock and Load that came out last year, White Star Rising. But to give you a sense of why this is so, what I mean by this, I'm going to tell a little bit about the way in which the game works, and then in my conclusions I will share my impressions about the game with you, which pretty much will mean I will talk about the virtues of this game, which I believe to be many. This is a general view of the board of the game, which represents the nuclear wasteland where the scenarios of the game will take place. The map looks very thematic. I really think that it captures the feel of the game. It really seems to represent an area where something horrendous happened in the past, where the ecology is completely messed up, and where hard fighting goes on all the time. You have shell holes on the map, for example, and then you have more quote-unquote traditional landscape features such as hills, roads, urban centers, and different scenarios will use the features to create different types of situations. The game portrays three factions, two of which have a military structure. Such factions are NATO units and Nazi units. These factions are divided in formations, and units of a formation are identified by the symbol in the top right corner of the counters. For example, these are Rangers, and these are all units belonging to the same SS formation. Each formation is guided by a commanding officer represented by a specific counter that is stacked on a unit. That commanding officer can lend bonuses to units that are stacked with it. In this case, this commander can lend a +2, and also they can lend a bonus to units that are within the range printed by the second bonus. In this case, this commander officer lends a +1 to units within 2 axes of range. This bonus can be used to increase the attack value of a unit per turn, or it can be used to improve the chances of success when units within the bonus range are attempting to rally at the beginning of their activation. And units will try to do that if they were shaken in a previous turn. And as you can see, they're shaken. They receive this marker and they have different types of penalties that are printed there. Also, there is a third value on the commander officer that is the extended radio range, and it represents the number of axes within which units of that formation must be to be in full contact. If they are farther than that from their commander officer, then they are out of contact and they suffer a penalty for that. The mutants are not divided in formations, they all belong to the same group. That means that when the mutants are activated, all of the mutant units on the board can activate. They do not have commanding officers. That means that if they are shaken in a previous turn, they can read automatically when they're activated. But still, there are different types of mutant units. You have some armored vehicles, you have the regular infantry of the mutants represented by the zealots, and then you have some really scary monsters here. The Scourges, which are pretty much flying dragons, and scariest among all are the Ravagers, these enormous giants that do not have range attacks but can hit very hard when they are trying to smash things that are adjacent to them. Actually, these guys are so big that they can even grab helicopters and other flying objects that may be around them, if of course those objects are crazy enough to get close to a Ravager. With the exception of recon units, units usually have two types of firepower. One is indicated by a red number, and that is the firepower to be used against armored targets, and that one is a yellow firepower that is used against soft targets. And both firepower values have a small number printed by them, and that indicates the range up to which that weapon can be used without penalties. Also, units have a defense value printed in the bottom right corner of the counter, and the color in which the defense is printed indicates the type of attack that must be used against that unit. So if I'm attacking these rangers here, I need to use my yellow firepower. Against that vehicle, I need my red firepower. Then there's also a third type of target and attack, and that is indicated by a light blue color that is used for air units' defense factors and for attacks specifically designed against air units. For example, the Blighter here could use a 10 factor against an air unit or against an armor unit. And last but certainly not least, all units have a movement factor, which is printed right above the defense factor. Each formation in the game is represented by one or more activation markers that are placed in a cup and then are drawn randomly during the game. The scenario instructions will tell you how many activation markers a formation receives. When the marker corresponding to a formation is drawn, then that formation can activate. In this case now the second ranger can activate. After that is resolved, you simply draw another marker, and again, when the black hand marker is drawn, all of the units of the black hand group can activate. Also important thing, if a player has activated his units twice in a row, then the next group that activates must belong to another player. You cannot have more than 2 groups activating in a row. If this is a situation, then I have to keep drawing until I draw the black hand marker. But before that happens, I may draw an event marker, which is pretty cool. Events are a very neat concept in this game, and they really represent the unpredictable nature of the area in which the fight is taking place. When you draw an event marker, you roll 2d6 and you resolve the event indicated on this table. And some things may be favorable to the non-black hand player or players, but the most thematic ones and the ones that I find the most interesting to resolve are the events that allow the black hand player to add zealot units or maybe even ravager units to the board, because these zealots can just pop out from the most unpredictable places. Look at this result here. All units on road hexes are assaulted by zealots, 1 zealot per hex. Can be nasty when you're just adding these guys to the board and they're immediately assaulting your units, but I think it is really thematic. It really gives you the sense that you have a general idea of the area, but if you do not see anybody around, that does not mean that nobody is around necessarily. There may be enemies that are hiding and are ready to ambush you. I really like this aspect of the game. I really like the random events. Activated units can move up to their full movement allowance if they do not attack. They can fire without penalty if they do not move, or they can move and attack, or attack and move. But in that case, they can only move up to half of their movement allowance and they are firing with a penalty. Also, a unit that moves may be subjected to opportunity fire from units of the opponent that are still available for that. When you are activating your units, you decide whether to use them for specific actions, in which case they receive a finished marker. Otherwise, you can just leave them available for opportunity fire, and then you will place a finished marker on them when and if the opportunity fire is resolved. When you are attacking, the procedure is very simple. No tables are needed. You simply roll 2d6, you add the firepower that applies to the target that you're firing at, so red or yellow or light blue, and other modifiers may apply, based, for example, on range and whether or not you're moving and attacking. You compare the total modified attack with the defense of the target that may be modified by terrain, by concealment, which is a slightly different concept here. And if the total modified attack is higher than the total modified defense, the difference between the two values is the number of hits that is inflicted on the target. The attack is higher than the defense by 2 points, then the defender takes 2 hits. The first hit on a target forces the target to become shaken. The second hit reduces the target, so you flip the target to its reduced state, and the target is shaken also, and the third hit simply eliminates the unit. And you keep playing like this, activating formations, moving, attacking, fighting, resolving specific actions that the scenario instructions may require you to perform until one of the players meets the victory conditions, and those victory conditions will change from scenario to scenario. I like this game. I like it a lot. All the virtues of the game, the first one that comes to mind is theme. The theme is great. The game is bursting with theme. I usually play historically based games. I do not play many sci-fi, fantasy, war games, but here the game really did a good job in making me interested in the universe in which the story was taking place. The components do a phenomenal job in this, just because they're so detailed, so pleasant, and even those that are not quote-unquote pleasant, like the map looks a little drab, work. They are pleasant in that they are consistent with the theme and they help in generating the theme. The rulebook has a very nice introductory section that tells you the background story of the universe. It doesn't take it 20 pages, this is not over detailed, it just gives you enough detail to make the situation interesting so that you want to know what happens in that world. And then really remarkable is the scenario book, or the scenario section of the rulebook, because there you have a series of scenarios, each of which represents a different situation, each of which creates a different mission. The goals definitely change from scenario to scenario, and those scenarios are linked narratively. They do create a story if you play through them in the correct order. You really see that some of these scenarios deal directly with the consequences of the previous scenario. So that, again, even more helps you in getting the sense that you are seeing a series of battles that are not just senseless confrontations of, well, cardboard that is being pushed here and there, and hexes that are being counted, and dice that are being rolled, but you really are becoming part of a story that has a narrative strength that definitely you can perceive through the game. I love the random events. They really help in giving you, again, the sense of a real world, of a slice of a world in which, in fact, unpredictable things will happen. The cheat pull mechanic works exactly the same. It is one of my favorite mechanics in war game. I definitely have a soft spot for it, so maybe I'm biased there, but at least I'm giving a disclaimer. I just love that mechanics. The combat system is smooth, simple. You have enough modifiers that they result in a series of interesting decisions that you have to make that will make a certain position preferable to another one, a certain range preferable, and of course will create certain tough decisions. So you're going to look for a certain position which is dangerous to achieve, but that will then allow you to launch a better attack, or you playing it safe. Those modifiers are important, but at the same time there aren't so many of them, and they're not so esoteric that they will make you lose the sense of the big picture. You will not look at the board too mathematically. Again, losing the sense of the action, so just that you can have a +3 rather than a +2. Bottom line, this is a game that I enjoyed a lot. I liked it thematically, I liked it mechanically, and I like how the two things go together, which of course is always remarkable. This is a game that I would recommend to anybody who is interested in the theme, in the sci-fi theme, but more generally speaking, I would recommend it to anybody who is looking for a game that is definitely light on the rules, but pretty intense on the experience, on gameplay, and a game that delivers a fast, furious, brutal action that is fun to play from beginning to end.